Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Douglas County Town Hall. We're so pleased you're here, both here in person and online. We're here to continue our conversation about property taxes, and this is the third conversation we've had. But before we move on, I just want to say a little bit about the tornado that hit Highlands Ranch last week, because I live in Highlands Ranch. I was in my house when that happened. I've got an amazing video of my trees swaying from side to side. I was one of the fortunate ones. I lost no trees. I just lost my fences. A lot of people lost their trees. They lost their fences, their damage to their homes. But the important part is that no one was injured. No one was killed, and we lost no structures. So we have a lot to be grateful for. I have been out all weekend watching at our drop sites where people can drop off their trees for free. And what I have seen are so many neighbors and strangers coming together. We have a team called Team Rubicon of veterans that have come in here for a week, and they just go out with their chainsaw, cut up the trees, and help people for free. So we are very blessed here in Highlands Ranch and Douglas County. And I just want to thank everyone who has made the last few days just a relief for the people who are dealing with this commotion. So thank you. So as we get back to our conversation about property taxes, we're going to focus tonight on the rest of the process. You've seen your notice of value and perhaps appealed it. Tonight, we'll talk about what's next. We'll also talk about an upcoming ballot measure and the reasons your Board of Douglas County Commissioners has filed a lawsuit to stop the measure from being on the ballot. If you're listening on the phone, we invite you to head to your computer or pull up the internet on your cell phone and visit douglas.co.us/town hall to view the slides being presented tonight. Most importantly, we want to take your questions. Those on the phone can press *3 now to get in the queue. If you're joining online, type your question into the system and our moderator will read it. For those in the room, we'll invite you to raise your hand when the time comes. So I'm going to start right now with State Representative Lisa Frizzell. She has another meeting she needs to get to, but she graciously agreed to stop by for a few minutes to introduce herself to you and let you know what role she has played in this complicated process for many, many years. Lisa.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. As Commissioner Thomas said, I'm Representative Lisa Frizzell. I represent House District 45, which is here in Castle Rock. But I come with a long experience on property tax and property valuation, as I served as your Douglas County Assessor over the last 8 years prior to joining the General Assembly, and was in the office for a total of 25 years. I want to first say how grateful I am to the Douglas County Commissioners and Assessor Toby Domish for the amazing, amazing job that they have done with community outreach around property valuation and property taxes. I believe that this level of outreach is virtually unprecedented in the history of this county, and really unprecedented around the state. I don't think that there is any county that has done the amount of outreach to its citizens to help them understand the process of property valuation, the process of appealing your property, and what we're going to hear today going forward, what you should as a citizen expect and what your next steps are. So I just want to really say how grateful I am to our county commissioners, our county elected officials, for the leadership that they have shown during this really, really difficult time. From a legislative standpoint, we have tried to deal with this issue on a couple of different fronts, and unfortunately, the efforts provided were mostly unsuccessful. And we are now looking at this Proposition HH, which was a very, very late term bill that was slammed through in literally a week. That's not a great way to, in my opinion, to create public policy that affects literally every citizen in this state. Every citizen in this state is affected by property taxes, whether you own a home or you rent. That cost gets passed on to you no matter what. This is an extremely serious matter. And we've seen that with the amount of engagement that our citizens have displayed. And I'm deeply saddened that the leadership in this state chose really not to address the issues. We could have lowered the residential assessment rate in the legislature. We could have done some other things that are included in this bill in the legislature. The one thing that we can't do in the legislature is take your Tabor refunds. We can't do that. And that's why this is going to a vote. It's really, really important for folks to understand that the only reason that you're going to see this on the ballot in November, if it makes it that far, is because it affects your Tabor refund. It affects the Tabor surplus that is so important to the citizens of this state. So I appreciate very much the ability to join you all. I've been at 2 of the previous town hall meetings, and it's a great experience to hear what you as citizens are really concerned about. And please, please make sure you listen carefully to all the information that's being provided this evening around Proposition HH and what the commissioners have done to join that particular lawsuit. It's great leadership that we are showing here in Douglas County. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Frizzell. I'm going to turn it over now to our amazing assessor, Toby Domish, who has been recognized statewide for his deep knowledge on this really complicated topic. Toby.
Thank you, Commissioner. As she said, my name is Toby Domish, your county assessor. Thank you all for being here tonight in person and on the phone. We're thrilled to have this 3rd installment of our town hall discussion on property taxes. And I just want to say, if you haven't heard already, this is the most impactful reappraisal that's ever happened in the state of Colorado. And we're facing the most impactful property tax situation that we've ever seen in the state of Colorado. So that's why we're spending so much time and energy on it. It affects all of us really dramatically. I want to also mention Highlands Ranch, because what a dramatic event that occurred. What a set of storms we've had throughout the Front Range in Colorado, but what a storm we had the other day. The amount of damage to the vegetation and fencing there is just incredible. I come from eastern Iowa, where we are used to tornadoes, and I drove through there and I just really couldn't believe my eyes. So we anticipate there may be a question or two tonight about that, and we'll do our best to address that. But we do have really big property tax issues that we want to talk about. I want to say you can visit douglas.co.us/town hall in order to see a video copy of this presentation, as well as the slides that we will have available to you tonight. You could also go to douglas.co.us/assessor to get to my office's website, which is an award-winning website, which Representative Frizzell played a big part in creating when she was assessor. We have an incredible amount of information out there where you can learn about your property, other properties in the county, and I hopefully tonight we'll be able to get in there and show where, for those of you who have filed an appeal, you'll be able to see your notice of determination on or about August 15th when we get our decisions done. But for now, let's turn it back to Roger, because I think we've got questions coming in probably.
Shortly, we will get to those questions. Thank you, Assessor. Again, we do want to take your questions tonight. So to ask a question from the phone, please press *3 on your keypad, and you'll be transferred to an operator who will take down some basic information. Once the operator notes your information, you'll be returned to the call and can listen to this conversation until it's your turn. Since we want to hear from as many people as possible, we'll ask you to limit yourself to one question, and when it's your turn, I'll call your name and ask you to repeat it for our live audience. If you are online, you can submit questions right under the viewer. And if you're here in the room, please remember we need to have you use the microphone so everyone online and on the phone can hear your question, and we'll get to your questions also. We, again, invite you to follow along with the slides tonight. They're very informative, and you can access those at douglas.co.us/town hall. Now, back to Commissioner Thomas.
Roger, thank you. So we're here to welcome our panel this evening. You've already heard from Assessor Toby Domish. You've heard from Representative Lisa Frizzell. The next individual who's going to speak is Michael Fields, who's with Advanced Colorado Institute. Michael?
Thank you, Commissioner. And I first want to echo something that Representative Frizzell said of just the leadership from Douglas County, the elected officials, including Representative Frizzell, but not just educating people about this issue, not just getting the word out about what's going on with property taxes, but also coming up with solutions, bills, et cetera. And so all the elected officials, the county commissioners, obviously the assessor, and the state representatives have done such a good job in a very tough circumstance, right? I live in Douglas County too, and my house value went up 44%, right? And you think about the taxes that people are going to have to pay, people that are on fixed incomes, people that are seniors trying to stay in their homes, right? And this is the problem that we face, and we knew it was coming for many years now. Ever since the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment, we knew when assessed value went up that we would also see the same increase to property taxes, and elected officials just didn't take it seriously enough, and then tried to pass something on the last day of session to address this problem, and it doesn't do it. And so the role that we've been having at Advanced Colorado is, one, the lawsuit, which a lot of 17 counties have voted to join. And basically the point of the lawsuit is saying that this has multiple subjects in it, right? A bill is supposed to be about one subject. This has many, many subjects in it. But also that the ballot language is misleading, right? That it doesn't say what is going on in this measure. It doesn't say how little the property tax relief will be. It doesn't say that it's coming from Tabor refunds. But Representative Frizzell is absolutely right. I think the key point when it comes to Proposition HH is that they don't need to do this. They don't need to go to voters. The only reason they're going to voters is to take Tabor refunds, that they can drop property taxes, the assessment rate. They have a lot of tools to lower property taxes without going and taking our Tabor refunds. $10 billion over 10 years is what we would lose. You think about those Colorado cashback checks and what people did with them last year. You know, energy prices are up. People are trying to pay their rent, et cetera. This is important money, and that should at least be a part of the discussion. And so we're really focused on showing if HH passes, how very little property tax relief you would get, right? As a residential rate, 6.76 to 6.7%. It's like a rounding error, right? If we still were under Gallagher, we'd be under 5% right now. So thinking about those numbers, we want to educate people, inform them about what this measure would do, but then also eventually talk about solutions that will stop this from happening in the future, because legislators have not stepped up and done that work. And so I'm glad to be here. Would love to answer any questions you all have, especially about Proposition HH.
Thank you, Michael. And there's one other person joining our panel tonight. He's just not here in person. This afternoon, I had the opportunity to listen to a wonderful presentation about the mess that Proposition HH that will be on the ballot this fall was. And I asked Ben Murray, who is the Director of Fiscal Policy Center at the Independence Institute, if he would like to join us. And he was able to hop online this evening. So I'm going to introduce Ben and give him like 4 or 5 minutes to talk about this situation, about HH. Then we're going to go into some questions. And then all of the panelists will be available to answer the questions as they come in. So Ben, would you like to talk for a couple of minutes?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, so much for inviting me to join you guys tonight. I am Ben Murray, the Fiscal Policy Center Director at Independence Institute. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit, public policy watchdog group think tank, and we've been tracking property taxes and this issue very closely. I just want to say from the outset that we have been doing a property tax video series that is designed to give people a very informative but simple overview of not only what's happening with Proposition HH and with property taxes right now, but the policies and the politics that have led up to where we are today and why we're in the position we're in today. And if you're on YouTube, you can go to, just search in the YouTube box for IITV, like letter I, IITV, for Independence Institute TV. And you will find under the playlist tab, a playlist of, I think we call it our property tax series. Really, really informative, about 5-minute videos each. There are several of them, really worth watching. And you'll get more from that than what I can share tonight personally. But I really want to, in terms of just right now, while I have a moment, I 100% echo everything Michael Fields just said about what Proposition HH does and why we're in the position we're in. A few things I'll note. So the Legislative Council, the state economists, just released their draft of the voter information booklet and how they will describe Proposition HH. And based on this first draft, they'll do other drafts. So based on this first draft, let me just warn you, and all of your friends that you talk to, you can warn them the same. You cannot rely on this Blue Book analysis to understand what Proposition HH does and what impact it will have on you. I'll list a few examples. Number one, with or without Proposition HH, whether it passes or not, Coloradans will see the largest property tax increase in Colorado history. That's unfortunate, but our politicians have chosen not to give us real property tax relief. So what they've said is you can vote for Proposition HH and see the largest property tax increase in Colorado history, just slightly less than it would have otherwise been, and give up your Tabor refunds forever. Or you can vote against Proposition HH and still see the largest property tax increase in Colorado history, but get to keep your Tabor refunds. Those are the options they've given us, which is very unfortunate. But the Blue Book presents it as a property tax cut. The Blue Book calls Proposition HH a property tax cut. And if you read the Blue Book and you go, well, gee, I want a property tax cut, and you vote for it, what's going to happen is you're going to get your tax bill in the mail. Your tax bill is still going to be 35% higher than it was last year instead of, say, 38% higher, but you'll also lose your Tabor refunds forever within the next few years. So it's a bait and switch. It's abysmal policy. It's not the solution they promised us. It's not the replacement for Gallagher they promised us when they repealed Gallagher. And I think it's really important that we educate the public and we educate our neighbors, because the way state economists and the way the Blue Book, the way politicians are presenting this measure is very, very different than the effect it will actually have on your pocketbook.
Thank you, Ben, for that information. And as we answer more questions, as we get questions, we'll be calling on everyone for some answers. So, Roger, do you have a call for us or a question to begin with?
I do have some questions. Before we take it, let me remind you that if you'd like to ask a question, press *3 on your keypad. You'll be referred or transferred to an operator who will take down some information and get you in the queue. We've got just a few people. We'd like to hear from more of you. And then if you're online, you can enter a question right below the viewer at douglas.co.us/town hall. We are going to hear first from Gregory. Gregory, go ahead.
Hi, I'm in my backyard in Highlands Ranch surveying the storm damage, which didn't hit me too badly. But I will preface my question by saying in January, I called 30 of the state senators and representatives who sponsored and voted for the Gallagher repeal, and I only heard back from 3 of them. So obviously, and their staff is what I heard back from, obviously they had no clue and they have no desire to fix this problem. So my question is, what pressure can the Douglas County commissioners or bureaucracy put on the taxing districts? Let's just take Metro Fire. If they would usually collect $10 million from property taxes, with an increase of 50% in property taxes, they would stand to get $15 million. What pressure can we put on them to reduce their mill levy so they only still collect what they used to collect, or maybe a modest increase? Is there anything the Douglas County government, commissioners, or anybody can do to influence mill levies?
Gregory, thank you for that question. The commissioners are already planning for a meeting in August, late August. At that meeting, we are going to invite people from every taxing district in the county. We're going to have this event at the event center. We can have probably 700, 800 people in that room. And we're going to talk to everybody who is a taxing district and make sure they are crystal clear on what Proposition HH will do for them to the people they provide that they provide services to and then get taxes in return. So that is the first step that the commissioners are doing after we filed a lawsuit to attempt to stop Proposition HH from going on the ballot. So this lawsuit did not survive a Denver District Court hearing, and we are going to the Colorado Supreme Court. Michael will talk about that more later. So know that that's the first pressure that the commissioners have exercised to try and stop this bait and switch on you. Then we're going to have this meeting in August with all the taxing entities to talk with them about, make sure they're clear on what they can and can't do. Senate Bill 108 this year allows them to lower their mill levies and then resume them to the current level in the future. Toby, did you have something else you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I would just like to add real quick. Our office is preparing the data for that meeting in August, whereby we will provide at that time to each of the taxing entities in Douglas County the value, the assessment value certification situation, whether Prop HH fails or Prop HH succeeds. And so for that meeting, we're going to have real live data available to them as to what their certification looks like, so that at the very least, no one can say, we don't have any information to be able to do that, to be able to look at that. They'll be right in front of them.
So that's the first step in our plan, and we're going to continue working on this. We will also encourage all of you to go to the assessor's website, put in your address. That will pull up all the entities that provide a tax to you. You can scroll down on the left where it says tax authorities. You can click on that, and then you can see everyone you pay a tax to. You can also click there and get contact information for those districts. And you also can reach out to them and pressure them as well. Thank you for the question, Gregory. Roger, do you have another one for us?
We do. This is an online question submitted by Pamela. She asked, why can't we appeal the repeal, since we were essentially tricked into voting to get rid of Gallagher on the pretense of no tax increases? Yet here we are, increasing taxes to the point where people will go bankrupt.
Sure, I can tackle that. I think, one, there was a lot of misinformation going on during that debate back in 2020 on the Gallagher repeal. And part of it was the messaging that said we want to freeze rates. Well, it didn't let you know that if your house goes up in value, even if the rate freezes, you're going to be paying more, which is exactly what happened, right? And so I think a lot of people are frustrated right now. I think, it really, the legislature isn't going to do anything about this, isn't going to try to put something in place to stop this from happening in the future. And therefore, it takes a citizens initiative, right? Us going and getting signatures to put something on the ballot, which our group is working on for next year. It's not exactly the Gallagher Amendment, but it is a form of a cap that would prevent 50 or 40% increases. And so, we're working through that process. But I think, the key with this is just they promised that they were going to replace it quickly. That has never happened. And to the question before this, really, you think about education, very important topic. I'm a former teacher. I believe in, paying teachers more, et cetera. But education is blocked from really lowering these mill levies. Mill levies are for education are dealt with at the state level, and they're fixed. And so even if all these special districts, the counties, and I hope that they do drop mills, you're still going to be paying a significant amount more because so much of your property taxes go to education. So to answer your question, yes, we can do something similar to the Gallagher Amendment, put it on the ballot. But again, it takes 125,000 signatures. It takes millions of dollars to get something on the ballot. We want to put pressure on the legislature, the governor, to do something this year to stop that increase from happening that we're about to see.
Thank you, Michael. And I would just like to remind all of you to press *3 on your keypad if you would like to ask a question. You can also participate online at douglas.co.us/town hall. And if you're just now joining us on the phone, we invite you to visit douglas.co.us/town hall, where you will find a copy of the visuals that are going to be presented here tonight. And we have over 1,100 people online listening, so I'd like to welcome you and thank you for being here tonight. Assessor Domish, do you have more information for us?
Yeah, why don't I talk about the PowerPoint deck that we've made available here tonight as well as online. There's 30 or 40 slides in there that represent a presentation that I very commonly do in front of neighborhood groups, real estate groups, homeowner groups. We're not going to talk about most of those slides today. We're going to touch on just a few of them, including the one that's up here now. You really need to start this conversation with a reminder about how to calculate taxes, because taxes are simply not about the value that the assessor places on your property. It's calculated by taking that value times the residential assessment rate, which Mr. Fields has mentioned already, and then again against the sum of your local mill levies. And all three of these things are really important, because all three of them, or any one of them, can make your tax bill go way up or way down. And what's happened this year is really a very sort of unfortunate anomaly, a bit of a black swan event, in that Colorado assessors have performed their 2023 reappraisal, which responded to the real estate market between June of 2020 and June of 2022. And in that time frame, real estate markets, a residential market in Colorado throughout the state went up very dramatically. And so what you've experienced in Douglas County with a 30, 40, 50, 60, or even a 70% increase in value did not just happen here. It happened up and down the Front Range, east and west across the state, into the mountains, eastern plains, western slope, everywhere. There are some counties in the mountains where the average condominium increased by 100%, 90%, 110%. So it's quite dramatic everywhere, and we're all having to talk about this, which makes this problem more bizarre in that, why did the General Assembly not deal with it? In many reappraisals, these markets that are appreciating happen in one part of the county, in one part of the state. They happen in the Front Range, or they happen in the oil fields, or they happen in the ski areas. But in this reappraisal, it was across the state. There really was an opportunity for the General Assembly to act, and they didn't. Now, Representative Frizzell was here earlier and had to leave to go to an important meeting. She actually had a bill that was released, I think it was House Bill 1054, if I'm not mistaken, that would have required the county assessors across the state to cap their value increases to 5% per year, I think was the number. And that bill wasn't allowed out of committee. That bill could have been put on the floor and put up for negotiation, and they could have done just about anything with that cap. They could have made it 10%, 12%, 15%. Anything. There is no reason for property tax assessments to go up 30 to 60% in 1 year. That's not the point of a property tax system. Anyways, I digress. I think I'll leave it there, but I want to talk about 2 or 3 things that we should get through tonight as it relates to me. One, the ability to file an appeal on your assessment, the deadline for that has passed. That was June 8th. We've talked about this in the past two town halls. And so the deadline to file an appeal has concluded. Our office is now working on processing 31,000 residential appeals. That is 1 out of every 4 to 5 homeowners in Douglas County. We're not the only ones in this boat. Most of the counties throughout Colorado have a very high appeal rate. That is more than 3 times the previous record of appeal rate that we've had. So we are working on that now. And we have to have those decisions completed by August 15th. I'm going to finish with this, and we'll move on to the next thing. On August 15th, my office will issue decisions in the form of an NOD, Notice of Determination. They will be mailed on August 15th. They will also be published online on our website on or about that date, on the 15th or the 16th. And so we'll talk more about that, but that's the very next thing in the process. And after that, CBOE. It sounds like we've got a question on the phone.
Roger.
Let's hear from Eric. Eric, go ahead. Eric, you are live on the phone. Do you have your question?
Yes, I want to know what are the commissioners in the county going to do with the incredible increase in revenue from property taxes? Are you planning to increase fire protection, safety, police, infrastructure, roads, bridges? What are you going to do with all this extra money based on the property tax increases?
So, Eric, thank you for that question, because while everyone else is seeing an increase in the kind of revenue they're going to bring in, there is a paragraph in this Proposition HH that caps county revenue at the inflation rate of 2022, which was 8%. The other part that is a problem is that last year, the Douglas County Commissioners did a 1.25% temporary reduction in the mills for all our residents, which resulted in a $10 million reduction in the amount of revenue that the county brought in. We are going to have to start our calculation of the increased inflation minus that $10 million. And that means that Douglas County is actually facing a $7 million shortfall going into next year's budget. And we are looking at ways that we can reduce the budget either through ending some programs, some early retirement programs, or some reduction in manpower so that we can get our budget back under control. So Douglas County is in a much different position than everybody else. Eric, thank you for asking that question so we can get that information out to everybody. Thank you. And you have another online question, Roger?
We do. This was submitted by Lori. She asks, I know we can typically pay property taxes in 2 payments. Is there any other payment options for next year? And what about the following year?
So Assessor Domish, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, thank you. So you have the choice of making 2 payments or 1. And as of yet, I have not seen any change to the law for that. Now, when we get into next legislative session, there is going to be some desperation unless we get a fix to this issue between now and then, because a whole lot of families are looking at some large increases. So it will be interesting to watch the early legislative session next year to see if they address this specific issue. Now, having said that, there is a new program called a property tax deferral program. So for those homeowners who are facing a struggle to pay those property taxes, should this come to fruition, they can go to our website, the Douglas County Assessor's website, and look up information about that property tax deferral program. It does have some complexity to it, but you can call us or look it up online, and that might help.
So just to remind everyone, if you're listening on your phone, on your keypad, type in *3 so that you can get your question to us. Roger, do you have another question?
I do. Let's hear from Mary Jane next. Mary Jane, go ahead.
Yes. How can we contact the state officials to get them to listen to the citizens? I feel like the county commissioners are very understanding and very willing to listen to the citizens, but the state does not seem as willing.
So I'm going to ask Michael if he has any suggestions, and then we'll ask Ben if he has any suggestions. Michael?
Yeah, I think it's always important to contact your elected officials. Obviously, the elected officials that you have here in Douglas County are very good on this issue, voting the right way, proposing good ideas. It's in other parts of the state. And so you can look up on the state website how to contact different legislators. I think the key at this point is, and I'll talk about this a little bit about when we talk about the lawsuit too, but the key right now is to put pressure on the governor to call a special session to deal with this problem without asking to take away our Tabor refunds. And so I would contact the governor's office and say, you know, we should be lowering property taxes, coming up with that longer term solution, call people back and put that pressure on the governor in order to do that. Because at this point, and also if you vote, if HH is on the ballot and you vote against it, right, basically that puts the pressure on these elected officials to come back in November and do something about it. So I would contact any elected official that you can, but also the key right now is the governor and him being able to call a special session.
Thank you, Michael. Ben, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so Michael, I think is spot on that. That ultimately the governor needs to call a special session and actually fix this problem without this bait and switch taking our table refunds. Unfortunately, we're in a situation right now where citizens can't put an alternative on the ballot because the legislature waited to the last minute after the deadline to do a citizen initiative. So that's not an option. So we really do have two options: vote for or against HH, both of which will result in a massive property tax increase. The only third option is Governor Polis calling a special session and fixing this problem. My assumption is that Governor Polis will not do that until Proposition HH fails. So the first thing you can do is do everything you can within your power in terms of your own vote and educating your friends and neighbors to oppose HH and send the message to Governor Polis and to the legislature that this is not the fix that you promised us, right? We don't accept this. We're not going to give away our table. We're not going to be held hostage and extorted to give up our table refunds. You send that message, and that'll put pressure on Governor Polis to call that special session. He'll have a month and a half to give us a real property tax relief bill, not this scam that they've given us.
Thank you, Ben. Let me just clarify one thing. I just answered a question from Eric about what the county was going to do with its windfall, and I explained that there is not going to be a windfall. There is a provision in HH that would allow the commissioners to hold a meeting, explain to the public why this 8% increase was not enough for us, and that we were going to increase the amount of revenue that the county would bring in. And then that vote would go before all three of the commissioners. As one commissioner, I assure you that this time of year with what's going on, I will not vote to increase the taxes that Douglas County levies on your property taxes. So just to make that clear. I'm going to move over to the Assessor Domish, and you can do some more explanation of all the work that your office has been tasked with doing.
I want to cover Gallagher for a second here because it has been mentioned a number of times. The chart on screen really shows what Gallagher did with respect to residential property taxes in the state of Colorado over decades. When Gallagher was implemented in about 1982, I think, the residential assessment rate was 29%. And as residential property values increased over the decades in the state of Colorado, and if you've been in the state of Colorado for a long time, you've been able to enjoy that appreciation. Gallagher forced the residential assessment rate down to its ballpark today of around 7%. All right. If Gallagher were in place today, and as Mr. Field stated earlier, the current residential assessment rate is 6.765. Think of that as a tax rate because that's exactly what it is. Proposition HH proposes an assessment rate of 6.700. That's less than a 1% decrease in that number. I want you to think about the prospect of whether you'll notice that when your assessment went up 50%. No one will, obviously. If the Gallagher Amendment were in place today, I believe the assessment rate for next year would be between 4.5 and 5%. And I want to show a slide here if I can find it. Right here. All right, I'm going to stand up for this so I can see it. This is an example of a property in my neighborhood. I'm going to walk through it for a minute. I live in the Pradera area of Douglas County between Castle Rock and Parker. This home in the 2021-2022 reappraisal was valued at $687,000. There was no exemption in place. The assessment rate at that time was, for 2022, was 6.95%. The mill levy in this neighborhood, 138. It resulted in a tax bill this year, early this year, January of this year, of $6,600. Now, per Colorado statute, Colorado assessors are required to perform a reappraisal. And the requirements for that reappraisal are very, very strict. We have very little latitude on how to perform that. It requires us to appraise property at market value. The appraisal date for The 2023 reassessment is June of 2022, right about the height of the marketplace. Now, without HH, this second paragraph shows the estimated taxes that this property is headed for. $8,990. You see the assessment rate there of 6.765. Proposition HH would change that to 6.7. I don't see there being much of a tax savings with Prop HH. There's certainly not a tax savings with or without it. It's making very little difference. What I want to point out to you is at the bottom right. If Gallagher still applied and the assessor still was required to do that reappraisal, that $976,000 value would result in an estimated tax of $6,747, $150 more than what we got this year. So I think that tells the story of the fact that this measure, HH, Senate Bill 303, Prop HH, does not replace Gallagher. Does a lot of things, but replacing Gallagher isn't one of them. Now, while I still have the floor, now there's so much we could discuss. I want to talk about milestones really quick. I don't know if we'll be able to get to this later. As I mentioned earlier, the appeal deadline has passed. We're now sitting here in late June, and by August 15th, my office has to have notices of determination published, and we will do that. We're going to make that happen. The next level of appeal for property owners who filed an appeal with my office, if they are dissatisfied with their appeal, is the County Board of Equalization, what we call CBOE. Those hearings will be held in the months of September and October, starting September 1, ending by November 1, those 2 months. The deadline for filing an appeal to CBOE is September 15th. If you're going to walk away from this conversation tonight with 5 or 10 things, remember that date. The deadline to file an appeal with the County Board of Equalization, if you're dissatisfied with your appeal that you filed to my office, is September 15th. Commissioner Thomas.
So do we have more questions? Roger?
Let's go to the phone and we'll hear next from T. T, go ahead.
Hi, so I just have a quick question about if we have provided or if we have submitted an appeal, do we have an opportunity to provide additional supporting documentation or information regarding that appeal? When we initially submitted, it kind of was like a frenzy, frantic appeal, and I feel myself as well as others may not have been able to provide all of the pertinent information to support our position.
This is Assessor Domish. Yes, you do, but you are running out of time because we are working on these appeals every minute of every day right now. So you'll want to get that into our office immediately. And by that, I mean this week. So please submit that. You can send an email to assessors@douglas.co.us and just tell us what you would like to add to it, whether it's a comment or information. And we'll pass that on to the appraiser who is assigned your petition.
Thank you, Assessor Domish. I'd like to thank all of you who have joined our town hall tonight on property taxes. We know this is an important topic, so we're going to go on for another hour or so. If you are on the phone and have questions, press *3 to get in the queue. And I'm going to go out here and take a question from one of the people who showed up for our event. Donna?
Commissioner Thomas, I want to jump back just a little bit when you addressed that the possible increase that would be voted on by our Douglas County commissioners. And you said you would definitely vote against it. Did I understand that correctly? How will I know how the other commissioners vote?
So Donna's referring to my clarification about the amount of revenue that Douglas County will bring in next year. So if the other two commissioners are interested in having a public meeting here to explain to the public why we need to ask for additional revenue from you, that will be very well published online on our website. And so you all will have the opportunity to come in and hear from the commissioners. And you always have the opportunity at meetings to have up to 3 minutes to talk to the commissioners, express your comments as well. So thank you for that question, Donna. Roger, we have another online question.
Let's hear next from Kevin. Kevin writes, the senior population in Douglas County are mostly living on fixed incomes. Inflation has hurt them greatly, and now they are faced with a large increase in taxes. Is anything being considered to help them? I think
I'd be glad to take this.
Okay, Ben, thank you.
So the answer to that is yes. Number one is last year, legislators introduced a bill, and this was the Republican caucus introduced a bill that would have expanded the senior homestead exemption by $50,000, and it would have made that exemption portable. So seniors could move if they wanted to and keep their exemption. Unfortunately, the majority party killed that bill. So they did not allow last year for seniors to get that expanded homestead exemption. What they did instead is they put a $40,000, rather than a $50,000 expansion, they put a $40,000 expansion to the senior homestead exemption in Proposition HH. So and now that's a small exemption, but there are a couple things to take from this. Number one, you can see how they're trying to put together a majority of people who are willing to vote for Proposition HH, right? And they're hoping to pull seniors into the camp of voting in favor of HH, because what these legislators did is they denied you your expanded exemption last year when it was introduced, because that bill came with no strings attached. It would have simply been a little bit of help to seniors, but there would have been no provision to keep our table refunds. So when it was a no strings attached proposal, the majority party killed that bill because they want to extort seniors. They want to pressure seniors into voting for everybody to lose their table refunds in order to get a little bit of a senior homestead exemption expanded, right? Again, my answer to that is I think that seniors should send the same message to Governor Polis and our legislators that, hey, what you're doing, extorting seniors, trying to take advantage of seniors is not acceptable. I think seniors should vote against HH and send that message to the politicians. They need to go back to the drawing board and try again and give us real property tax relief without taking our table refund.
So this is Toby, and I want to double down on Ben's statement, which I find to be completely accurate. Proposition HH makes the statement in the ballot, not in the ballot language, in the bill, in Senate Bill 303, that the senior exemption will be increased from 100 to 140,000 in 2025. That's a charade. What happens in 2025 is if you have a senior exemption property, you will lose the $40,000 exemption that they're trying to put in, the $50,000 exemption they're trying to put in place for this year, and the $40,000 exemption they're trying to put in place next year for all residential property owners. So what I'm telling you is, when we fast forward a couple of years from now, the difference between a senior exempted property and a non-senior exempted property will still be $100,000. There is no additional senior exemption. I've been doing this a long time. That 60-page bill has one good thing in it. It makes the senior exemption portable. That's it.
And just really quickly, I'll add on to this as my opinion. You think about when the senior homestead exemption passed, you're talking about 2000. Think of what home values were at that point versus what they are now, right? And we've had no significant jump to that at all since then. And so I would say, as Ben mentioned, this is a time when you put pressure on the legislature to say, look, This is a popular proposal. It is an important proposal, keeping seniors in their houses. We should expand it and we should make it portable. And so whether, if HH fails, which obviously hope it does, this is one where day one, somebody, and one of these representatives should bring this bill forward, push it through. We need to put pressure on them to expand the senior homestead and to make it portable, because it's so important given how much increase we've seen since 2000 in this state.
Michael, and we're going to have Assessor Domish talk a little bit about mill levies, because that's a big part of this equation.
One of the greatest misunderstandings about property taxes is the mill levy component, because it's so complicated. It's really ironic because the Constitution states a number of things about property taxes in Colorado, that it should be understandable, uniform, predictable. It's got these broad value statements in it. And I feel like we've lost all of those to the point where I don't know that our property tax system is even constitutional anymore. But mill levies is an example. It's complicated. Every local taxing entity determines almost their own levy. And there's a myth that your Douglas County commissioners, or in any given county, your county commissioners determine the levies for each of the entities. There was a question earlier, a smart question by a gentleman who asked, what are we doing with police revenue and fire safety revenue and all of this? And your commissioners in this county and other counties do not have control over that. Commissioner Thomas and the other two commissioners get to determine the levy for the Douglas County mill levy only, which is only a fraction of the total levy that we all pay into. So the fire districts are determining their own levies. The metropolitan districts are determining their levies. The school district levies are an entirely different section of law. And we have a school district representative here. Maybe we'll ask her to talk about that. That's a different matter. But please understand that each Board of County Commissioners only determines the levies for the county government. And each of the other entities, from your water district to your fire district to your metropolitan district, determine those levies for those individual districts.
Thank you, Assessor Domish. And let me just remind all of you, I spoke earlier about a summit that the Douglas County Commissioners are holding in late August. And at that meeting in August, we are going to invite all of the Metro District boards, their treasurers, whoever wants to come, but we want to make it clear to them that they have a big role going forward in determining how much they can reduce their mills, if they're going to at all. So know that your commissioners are continuing to educate everyone we can about what this is all about. And I understand we have another online question, Roger.
To go to the phone first, and it's Branka, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Go ahead, Branka, you're live.
Branka. Hi there. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can, Branka. We can hear you.
Okay, I may have typed in my question previously. I'm not sure if it was listed. I understand Gallagher. May 25th, we met in person with Kyle to appeal our assessment. Our property tax assessment rate went up 80.5%. We need a logical explanation from Mr. Toby Domish for the following. Our neighbors whose property is similar acreage, the house is larger by 1,700 square feet. It is newer, has a huge two-story barn with a 1,500 square foot finished basement. None of this we have, and they were assessed $600,000 less than we were. This is not the only property in our neighborhood that has been assessed much lower than ours, albeit larger, newer, finished basements, etc. Funny enough, since the initial meeting with Kyle, I found our property has been posted online that the original assessment was lowered by plus minus 100,000, which still makes it 500,000 more than the non-comparable, more expensive properties. I need an explanation.
Thank you for your question. This is Assessor Domish. So up until May 1, what our office has done is completed a mass appraisal. And what that meant is we took the market data from the study period and built valuation models for all of the properties in Douglas County. Those valuation models are mathematical models which get applied to a group of properties in a particular area in a particular market. So I can't give you the answer that you're looking for right now, but if you came into the office and met with me, I would be able to show you your property and the other properties and that value model applied against all of them. And we can identify exactly why the other properties in your area are valued differently than yours, because it's all done in math. And so now that might be as a result of a lot of different things. It could be that we have incorrect characteristics on some properties. It could be, if you're in rural Douglas County, that some of your neighbors have agricultural classification. It might be an error in the record on your property or theirs. But at any rate, the same valuation model, the same mathematical model that we applied to yours was applied to your neighbors. And so we can mathematically account for those differences. But in order to do that, we need to know your address and the other address. And if you're interested in doing that, you can send me an email at assessors@douglas.co.us. I'll assign that to a particular appraiser, maybe Kyle, but perhaps someone else, and we'll be able to get you that answer. Now, separately from that is a question of, is your value too high? Because that really is a separate issue from what we set your neighbor's value at. The question, or the answer to that question, lies in what is the market data, what is the sales data from your neighborhood, from your area that are comparable to your property. And so during this time, between now and August 15th, our staff are working on these appeals and they're doing analyses and they're coming up with recommendations and conclusions based on that analysis. And the typical analysis for that looks like this. You file an appeal, you tell us your value is too high. That appeal gets assigned to an appraiser. They look at your petition, what other information you gave us, and then they'll go select comparable sales from your neighborhood, the best ones that they could find. Sounds like you're in a unique area. And so that'll be some significant work for them to do. And then they'll start chugging away at that analysis. It's the same type of analysis that a fee appraiser does if you get an appraisal for a refinance or for a purchase loan. And Kyle is an appraiser in our office, and he is likely working on your appeal and might be making changes and adjustments to your house as he's doing that. So if you're seeing indications through various data online that you're seeing the value change, that's not the final result. That's just him working through the analysis. Again, this is a very specific issue. You've got a complex question. So I invite you to come in and talk to me about it. Be happy to answer those questions.
Thank you, Assessor Domish. And I think we have an online question.
We do, but before we go to that, I'm going to ask the assessor to repeat his email address, but slow down.
Yeah, the email to the county assessor's office is assessors@douglas.co.us. Now, with 1,000 people online, I'm afraid to look at my email box tomorrow. We'll do the best we can to respond to those emails as they come in.
Thank you. Commissioner, we've got a online question from Nicole that I think Ben's going to take. If HH is so horrible, why was the measure brought forth and approved? I understand what the commissioners and assessor are saying. What is a benefit? Why push through if it doesn't benefit residents?
Hey, Nicole, thanks so much for this question. I think it's a really very reasonable question. And let me see if I'm understanding it right. If HH is so horrible, why was the measure brought forth and approved? So Proposition HH was referred to the ballot by the legislature. They passed a bill called Senate Bill 303, and that bill referred the measure to voters on the ballot this November. That measure will be called Proposition HH. So it was put forth and approved by the legislature, but it needs voter approval to become law. Now, Michael made this point, and I'm going to repeat it because it's important. The legislature does not need to refer something to the ballot and get voter approval to cut our property taxes, to give us a property tax break, or actually in this case, to just protect us from this massive increase. They don't need our approval for that, okay? If that's all they were doing was giving us real property tax relief, they wouldn't need to put it on the ballot. The only reason why this is on the ballot is because they need your permission to take away your table refund. Okay? So if you say if it's so horrible, why would it be put forth and approved by the legislature? Well, the answer to that is the legislature wants to keep and spend as much of your money as they can, right? I mean, I'm just being blunt. The legislature truly believes that all of you on this call are better off if politicians and bureaucrats are spending more of your money for you, right? So Proposition HH is a massive tax increase. They can't get that massive tax increase unless they ask your permission. So that's why they referred to the ballot, is to get more of your money. Now, they're saying it's property tax relief. That's the what's the word I'm looking for here? That's the, somebody help me out. That's the premise here, right? The sort of the
carrot.
The fake out here is, oh,
It's the carrot.
yeah, that's the fake out here, right? Yeah, that's the carrot here. Is, oh, you're going to get property tax relief. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to get property tax relief. You're going to get a slightly less massive tax increase if HH passes. But on net, over the long term, the state will get far more money out of this deal than what you're going to save from a little bit of property tax relief up front. And the other thing that's really, really, really important to know about Proposition HH is that it does not solve the long-term property tax problem. What is the long-term property tax problem? Now that Gallagher's gone, Gallagher over the long term was this offset. The assessor here did a good job, and I apologize for forgetting your name, assessor, but he did a really good job of explaining how Gallagher brought the rate down over time so that as home values rose, property taxes stayed reasonable. Proposition HH does not do anything similar to that. It lowers slightly, very slightly, 0.065%, lowers the rate once, okay? Which means that in the future, your property tax bill will continue to grow at the same pace that your home's value grows, right? So this doesn't provide a long-term assurance to taxpayers that next time there's a bull market in housing, there won't also be a massive property tax increase. The only thing this measure guarantees is that you will lose your table refund and that the state will get far more of your money. And the other thing is, why would the legislature adopt it? Well, when they cut the little bit of property tax, quote unquote, relief they're giving you, comes out of local coffers, right? It comes out of the coffers of local government. But taking your table refunds, that money goes into the coffers of the state government. So state politicians love the idea of getting of the state, the legislature getting to spend more of your money and getting to increase your taxes. And then, yeah, I'm sure maybe local governments will lose a little bit of money, but that's on local government to sort out and figure out. You see, that's what this is about. And I'd be interested what Michael has to add to that, if anything.
I do briefly. So I think looking at this historically, we've talked about the Gallagher Amendment a lot. And I always say the two most important fiscal issues that have been in front of voters over the last few years are the Gallagher repeal, but also Proposition CC in 2019. The reason that was so essential was because at the time we were talking about taking $300 million of TABOR refunds. It was permanently taking all of them, but that was the amount at the time. As we know, last year, TABOR refunds were $3.5 billion, right? And they're projected to be $3.3 billion this next year. A lot of money that has gone and will go back to taxpayers because Proposition CC lost. The key with those two measures is that HH is taking both of those and kind of combining them, which is why we're doing, part of the reason why we're doing this lawsuit is saying this is multiple subjects because you're trying to, bring up CC again, taking TABOR refunds, putting it largely to education, and also on the other side, calling it property tax relief. And so they're basically taking the Gallagher problem, saying, we couldn't pass CC. We lost by 8 or 9 points. People didn't want to do it. And now TABOR refunds are so much bigger that they're more popular than ever, right? And so how do we get at that money without just directly asking for it because we know the answer will be no? Well, we say there's a crisis going on. Why don't we connect it with that? Come up with this second subject, which is lowering property taxes, right? And so that is the combination that they're doing here, taking something that is unpopular, taking TABOR refunds. They've tried it before. It's failed. Pair it with something that is popular, which is anything we can do to lower our property taxes we want to do, even though it's a very small amount, right? And so this is where the education, why I'm glad people are talking about this, is showing on one side, very small amount of relief. We're still going to see this huge jump. On the other side, something that's very unpopular that is already lost. And that is what's going on here.
Thank you, Ben and Michael. And Roger, I bet there's another online question for us.
We've got several. Here is a question from Melissa. She writes, since teachers nor the county will receive more money, is the state receiving the windfall?
So I sort of answered that question, right? But there's a little bit more to it than that. The answer is, and this has been on the phone, the answer is that the school districts won't be affected, right? They've insulated, in the measure, they've basically exempted the school districts. And if anybody else wants to provide more context to that, I'll let them do that. But it's effectively exempted the school districts. It's other local governments that are going to be potentially impacted. Now, again, you have to ask yourself, you know, there might be special examples like, like Commissioner Thomas explained, where certain districts have done certain things where they're not going to get a massive windfall. But in general, your local governments are going to get a big tax increase, right? And any kind of cut from that increase, right? So let's just say, for example, you have a local fire district or something, and they're expected to get a 35% tax increase. If HH passes, maybe they'll only get a 32% tax increase, right? Tax revenue increase. Now, you know, it's kind of up to you as a resident to decide, is that really a crisis to your fire district's funding, that they're only going to get a 32% in tax revenue increase instead of a 35% tax revenue increase under this measure? Is that really a funding crisis? Now, I would say no, but you can decide that for yourselves. But what you have to understand is that this applies a little bit different district by district by district for a number of different factors. But the main provision that might limit the growth in local tax revenue for a particular district, say school districts, fire districts, counties, cities, that provision exempts school districts. So school districts won't even see a cut from the increase, if that makes sense, right? Now, on the state side, it gets a little complicated. The state has a requirement to backfill lost education funding, right? Effectively, there's a little bit more to that, but basically the state is going to do a little bit of backfilling, but that won't come out of the state budget. The state will use your TABOR refunds to backfill the education. So remember how I said education won't really be touched under all this? The state will use your TABOR refund to backfill education. And that's how they're pitching it. They're saying, oh, we're going to use your TABOR, a little bit of TABOR refund money to backfill education because education is important. The truth is, what they're going to keep from you, what they're going to keep from your TABOR refund, which is an effective state tax increase, right? What they're going to keep is way, way more than what the state needs to backfill education, right? And second of all, does education need a backfill because they're getting a 32% tax increase instead of a 35%? I mean, that's the state's logic here is oh, we've got to use your TABOR refund to backfill education because education's your school district's only going to get a 35% revenue increase instead of, they're only going to get a 32% revenue increase instead of 35. So we've got to backfill that 3% difference. And again, these are estimates, right? That's the logic. But again, what about all the extra TABOR refund money they're using? So they've quote unquote backfilled education, and they still have a ton of TABOR refund money they're taking from you beyond that. That is just a massive windfall to the state government.
Ben, thank you for that answer.
I hope that
and
answers
we're
your
going
question.
we've got someone here who handles the finances for the Douglas County School District. Jana has been here before, and I'm going to let her explain how there's going to be more money that we are going to pay for in our property taxes to the school district, but the school district isn't going to see a penny of what we pay. Jana?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jana. I'm the CFO at Douglas County School District. And thank you for these town halls, Commissioner Thomas and Assessor Domish. I think I know a lot about property taxes, and I've learned something at every one of these meetings that I've come to. So thank you for holding these. Property taxes or school district funding is controlled by the legislature. So they determine that we get a certain amount per student. That creates our funding bucket. That bucket is first filled with local property taxes, and then the rest is filled with state money. As local property taxes go up, the money that the state puts in just goes down. So as our assessment rates go up and our property assessment rates go up and the mill levies go up, it just means the state pays less. So to the point that was made just a minute ago, The backfill to property taxes, this doesn't go to backfill education. It goes to backfill the general fund that the state would have put into school districts anyway. So this does not affect education at all. This is just switching who's paying the bill for education. So while we get a big piece of that pie, when you see that pie up there of the school district getting 40% of the property taxes, we don't get more money from this at all. It's the same amount.
Thank you, Jana.
Yeah, and this is Ben again. I appreciate that clarification. That is a very good clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And I think we have another online question, Roger.
We do. Let's hear from Kyra wrote, what would the lawsuit do? Would it stop or delay the assessment?
So basically, the lawsuit we're talking about is the Proposition HH lawsuit. And that would basically, we're asking for two things. One is that it would get thrown off of the ballot because it violates single subject. As I mentioned, we have a single subject provision in our Colorado Constitution. Every bill, every ballot measure has to have one subject. This one has at least 5 subjects, and saying we think that it should be off totally. The second thing that we're asking for, though, which is a little bit more realistic, given the court's makeup, is the change to the ballot language, right? That more information should be on that. And I want to get a little bit into why this is so important. There have been several tax cuts on the ballot in recent years that have passed. Legislators 2 years ago said, you know what, we're not that happy that that is going on, that those are passing. And so we're going to pass ballot language that we say increases transparency, that is more information for people. And we're going to say you have to put that in the ballot language, right? So now a tax cut has to say all these different areas that it's cutting from. So if it's a income tax cut, it has to say it's coming from education and prisons and healthcare. Whether or not that's true, they're saying that it has to go in that to try to discourage people from voting in favor of it. So this transparency, more information, only applies to citizens' initiatives if we do it. If the legislature does it, they can put whatever language they want, and people, I guess, don't need the transparency and extra information. And that's what's happened in this case, where they didn't even put numbers in this ballot measure. It just says, do you want to reduce property taxes on homes and businesses? If you think about every tax measure that you've ever voted on in Colorado, it always has numbers in it, right? The income tax, should it go from 4.55 to 4.4%? The reason they don't want those numbers in there is because, as the assessor said, it's such a small amount, right? 6.76 to 6.7%. They don't want that in the ballot language because people would be aware of it and say that's hardly any increase, any decrease at all. The second thing that we're saying is it says, can we use the state surplus in order to lower property taxes? Right, so it makes everybody see a surplus. Of course, that's money sitting there. Why wouldn't you want to use that to lower property taxes? What they neglect to mention is the state surplus is actually Tabor refunds, the refund checks we're talking about, right? In every other measure that they've ever done, it says, can the state retain money it otherwise couldn't retain? Or can it keep more revenue that it couldn't otherwise keep and would have to get refunded to taxpayers? So what we're asking for in this lawsuit is saying at least explain that it's Tabor refunds, that it's money they can't retain, and at least put numbers in there so people are aware of that. So that is what the heart of it, single subject violation, but also misleading ballot language.
Thank you, Michael. And I'd like to introduce Roger, our moderator, because he is going to tell us about the polling question you all get to answer.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. It's easy to participate. All you have to do is use your telephone keypad to enter the number of your response. If you are participating online, you can also enter your response there. Here is the question, and it is, how confident are you in understanding this property tax topic? Press 1 for very confident. You could explain it to your neighbors in detail. Press 2 if you feel confident, you get the main ideas but still have questions about the details. Press 3 if you're somewhat confident and still have questions about many of the main issues. And press 4 if you're not confident about the issue. We'll report on the results in a few minutes. And Commissioner Thomas, let's take some more questions.
Thank you. We were going to try and get a slide up on the screen. Are we able to get it? Okay, so we'll do a phone question then while we're trying to get this slide up, because it's the language that's going to be on the ballot for HH that Michael was just talking about. So we'll put that up there as soon as we can figure out how to do that. Roger, what question do you have for us?
All right, we're going to go to Arthur on the phone. Arthur, go ahead.
Oh, good evening, and thank you for my question tonight. My wife and I have lived in Douglas County for 23 years, and we're both over 65. And in our first home in Highlands Ranch, we were in it for 10 consecutive years. And then we upsized to another home in Highlands Ranch. And for this current year, we finally qualified for the senior discount. However, I had to wait 2 additional years because I had to live in my new residence for 10 consecutive years. Now, my issue is this. This seems very regressive against seniors who want to downsize, and now they're starting all over again, and they have to wait an additional 10 years to take advantage of that senior tax exemption. And my question to the commissioners is, what can you do to bring some sanity, to this issue? Why are we not able to take advantage of this if we've lived in Douglas County, paid our taxes for 10 consecutive years, regardless of what home we're in?
Thank you for that question. It's an excellent question and a very frustrating topic for, I'd say, about 13,000 homeowners in Douglas County and tens of thousands across the state. Because after all, wouldn't the ability to downsize and take the senior exemption with you make sense? Sure does to me. We've been trying to, so you're speaking to the issue of portability, which Mr. Fields and Commissioner Thomas have both mentioned tonight. And we at Douglas County, commissioners, assessors, and Douglas County representatives and senators have, along with experts like Mr. Fields, have been pushing this particular topic for years. Mr. Murray mentioned it earlier in the call. I testified on this issue, I think in the legislative session before last, where there was a bill to increase the senior exemption from $100,000 of actual value to $200,000 of actual value and to make it portable. And that bill failed. Your county commissioners have no authority in the law whatsoever to expand that particular measure or to change it. It is a state program. It is a state law. But what it doesn't require is a vote of the people. The state legislature, the state assembly, could have passed these bills any one of the most recent years. And as Mr. Fields said, values have been going up in Colorado for years and years and years, and this number hasn't been changed. It's long past it being changed, and it's long past being due to be made portable. So I think this has everything to do with who we elect into office, because they ultimately decide the fate of this thing.
Thank you, Assessor Domish. Roger, do you have some more information for us?
I do. We are going to do a follow-up question. Let me give you the results of our first polling question. It was, how confident are you in understanding this property tax topic? 39% said confident, 33% said somewhat confident, 17 of you are very confident, and 11 are not confident at all. We really appreciate that input, and we want to ask a follow-up question. Again, it's easy to participate. All you have to do is use your telephone keypad or enter it online. The question number 2 is, to feel more confident in your understanding of this issue, what do you need more information about? Choose the one here, as I'm about to read, you want more information about most. Press 1 for the assessment process. Test 2 for senior exemptions. Press 3 for Tabor and Gallagher. Press 4 for HH, Proposition HH. Press 5 for mill levies. And press 6 for taxing authorities. So 1 for assessment process, 2 senior exemptions, 3 Tabor and Gallagher, 4 Prop HH, 5 mill levies, and 6 taxing authorities. While you're voting, I'm going to hand it back to Commissioner Thomas to talk about the ballot language.
Thank you, Roger. So we've been talking about Proposition HH, and I've actually heard this referred to as Preparation H. But read along with me and you can see why people are going to think this is cool and I want to vote for it. So Proposition HH that will appear on the ballot in November unless our lawsuit is successful and it gets pulled off is going to ask voters, shall the state reduce property taxes for homes and businesses, including expanding property tax relief for seniors and backfill counties, water districts, fire districts, ambulance and hospital districts, and other local governments, and fund school districts by using a portion of the state surplus up to the Proposition HH cap as defined in this measure. Now, this is all butterflies and helping kids, and why would we not vote for this? So this is not clear at all, because is this going to give us very much property tax relief? No. Is this going to take our Tabor refunds forever? Yes. So we've been telling you the truth about what HH is. And nowhere in this ballot language is it anywhere close to what is actually going to happen. So I want to applaud everybody here in the room and all the people online who are taking this beautiful Wednesday evening when they could be outside enjoying the weather. Instead, you are in here or on your phones educating yourself. So the big takeaway from this meeting is that just say no to HH, and say that to every friend you have. Just say no to HH. Roger, what other question do you have next?
We are going to hear next from Tim on the phone. Tim, go ahead.
Thanks, sir. I went ahead and filed an appeal. Got that in on time, like, 31,000 of my friends. And after a real hard thought discussion with my wife, we've decided after 33 years in Douglas County that it's time to move. So we're on our way to Texas. We've sold our house. And the question I have is, will the appeal I filed be valid for the new owner who's coming in?
Wow, I expected a different question. The answer is yes. You filed an appeal. You sold your home. We will continue to analyze that appeal and make a determination. Now, the result of that appeal, let's say the value is reduced, will affect taxes next year. And so presumably you'll be long gone, and so that won't affect you financially. But just because you sold your home, we will not cancel or delete the appeal unless you tell us to. Because you filed the challenge, you own that petition. And if you choose to, I'm not suggesting you withdraw it, but if you wanted to do that, it would require you to tell us to do that for us to stop looking at it. Is there another question in there? I'm not sure I answered what you were looking for.
So Roger, do you have another question?
We do. We have an online question from Troy. He says 31,000 appeals, 48 days until August 15th equals 645 appeals per day. How is it possible to review that many appeals?
A lot of extra hours. So our staff, we have a staff of 46, and we have hired temporary staff to help us with the administrative part of that. We have also brought on 4 additional licensed appraisers to our staff of about 30. We have licensed commercial appraisers, land appraisers, and residential appraisers, as well as a team of analysts on staff. Every single one of them are working these appeals. So some of them are used to working retail industrial properties. They're also doing homes. Some of them are used to ag and ranches, and they're also doing homes. So we're working nights, weekends. We've added staff on a temporary basis because I intend to use the budget provided to me last year for this year to get this done. And I think what day is it? Wednesday? I think Monday we did 654 decisions in one day. I don't know what number he just said, but I think we're on track. We're going to make our deadline.
Thank you, Assessor. And Roger, I bet you have some poll results for us.
I do. On our second poll question, we asked what would help you in understanding this complicated issue more. And the results were 29% of you said Tabor and Gallagher, and 29% said property possession HH. No surprise, those are the two things that are most confusing to people still. 16% said senior exemptions, 11% each said mill levies and taxing authority. And interestingly, the assessment process, Toby's done such a good job on this that there's only 4% of those who responded who still need more information on that.
Well, thank you for that, Roger. I'm wondering if this is a good time for us to start closing up the event tonight. Roger, would you agree?
More online question.
Okay.
And that is, if I can find it here, what percentage of appeals are generally successful, and what is the average reduction of successful appeals?
Every year is different. I've been asked this question, I think, 150 times in the past couple months. My answer has been in prior years, going back 10 or plus years, we would adjust somewhere between 25 and 40% of the appeals. The 25% was actually, I think, last year when we had record low appeals and record low adjustments. If we go back to the Great Recession, 2009, right after the real estate market's crashing and the stock market's falling apart, the financial market's falling apart, that year we adjusted 40 to 42% of the appeals. Now, this year, what I've seen so far with respect to the recommendations of our staff, and they've made recommendations to me and my management team of over 10,000 appeals so far, and we are adjusting about half. The reason I'm so general is because you look at one neighborhood and the adjustment rate is 25, 30% because our mass appraisal models did pretty well. You look at another neighborhood and the adjustment rate is 75%, which means our mass appraisal model failed. And so we could talk a lot more tonight. We're not gonna, but I am asking certain staff we have in our office where we have neighborhoods where our mass appraisals did so poorly, we are going to revisit those whole neighborhoods, whether there's been petitions or not. One last comment I want to make regarding this question is, it's very interesting to see the appeal rate from neighborhood to neighborhood across Douglas County varies widely. We have some neighborhoods where like half of the homeowners appealed and others where 5 to 10%. And that seems to have no relationship to our adjustment rate. So that goes to speak to how much we've been talking about this. I've done a lot of neighborhood groups, and clearly I've seen where I've gone to some HOA meetings and we've done some neighborhood groups, and literally almost everyone who went to that meeting filed an appeal because I encouraged them to do it. It gives us, the assessor, another chance to look at it. So those are some interesting facts. With respect to your appeal, if you filed one, it really is going to just depend on the appraiser who looks at it, whether they feel like you could have sold that property for that amount last spring or not. And if their answer is no, they're going to reduce it for you. And that's the bottom line there.
Thank you, Assessor Domish. We have one more question in the room, and then we'll do our recaps.
I'd like to know if the Tabor refunds will be negating the higher taxes.
Michael, would you like to take that one? And then we'll go to Ben.
Sure. I think, one, it depends on what your property is, right? There's some people that are renters or people that don't own property. They're obviously losing Tabor refunds. Some people who have, huge properties, and that small percentage over time could be greater. But I think overall, this is a measure that will ultimately take more Tabor refunds than it will give property tax relief in the long run. And so I think that is the key. It depends, again, on your certain circumstance. But ultimately, the important part of this too is that we're still seeing this massive increase. And so this, reduction in your property taxes isn't a true reduction. It is just slightly stopping a huge, massive increase. And so for a majority of Coloradans, you're going to see over the long run, definitely you're going to lose more Tabor refund money. But again, that depends on economics, how much Tabor refund there is there, et cetera. But it is set up to get more money to government, not less.
Ben, would you like to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I can't give a better answer than Michael did, except by getting a little bit more into the weeds, right? And I'll do that a little bit briefly, just to add some details. What the legislature did is, after Proposition HH passed, in the last 2 or 3 days of the session, they passed a separate bill, okay? And this separate bill said that if Proposition HH passes, TABOR refunds will be redistributed evenly for 1 year, for the first year, for 2023. What does that mean? It means anybody making under $100,000 for 1 year will actually get a bigger TABOR refund, okay? And higher earners will get a smaller TABOR refund in 2023 only. And they did this because they realized that folks would tell the truth about it. As people started to tell the truth, people like Michael and I and Commissioner Thomas, as the truth started to get out about Proposition HH, they knew what we would tell people was, hey, look, you might get a little bit of relief in the short term, but you're going to be giving up far more by giving up your TABOR refunds over the long term. The politicians, the legislators realized that. So in the very last minute, literally the very last possible minute, they passed this tag-along bill that said, oh, for the first year, lower earners, people making under 100,000, which by the way is more than 50% of voters, right? So anybody making under 100,000 will get a bigger TABOR refund because refunds will be distributed evenly for 1 year. Now, within a few years, we'll just lose our TABOR refunds entirely. Now, they're not telling us that. You have to educate yourself. That's why we're having this call. But, you'll hear that. You'll hear people say, oh, no, TABOR refunds will be bigger for most people. Well, that's true for 1 year until you just lose your TABOR refunds forever within a few years.
Thank you, Ben.
I'd like to add something. Those gentlemen did a fine job. On screen is an example of a property in Highlands Ranch with all these different scenarios applied. And I want to turn your attention to the last 2 columns at the bottom. One column shows Proposition HH having failed, and the next column shows Proposition HH passing. And what you'll notice for this particular property is that the tax bill from the prior year goes from about $3,800 to $5,200 without HH, down to $4,940, $260 of savings from Proposition HH. Now, that is way less than 1 year of TABOR refund. Second point I have is the average Douglas count, that tag-along bill that Ben artfully mentioned, is harmful to Douglas County residents. The average Douglas County property will have a reduced TABOR refund because of that tag-along bill. So it's a double. Yeah, it makes it even worse for Douglas County citizens, in my view.
Thank you, Assessor Domish. I'm going to give everybody on the panel just a minute to wrap up, and then we'll be done for the evening. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, appreciate so much interest in this topic. As the Commissioner Thomas said, people taking out time in order to do this is so important. The thing that I want to leave you with is that the fact that the only reason this is on the ballot, Proposition HH, is to go after TABOR refunds, right? That the cut to the increase is so small, so negligible, it's almost a rounding error. And we have to put pressure on our elected officials to fix this problem. Call a special session, the governor needs to do that. And we need to do the long-term fix, the replacement for Gallagher now, because we don't want to see people lose their homes, that spike that's going on, et cetera. And so I think the key is educating other people, talking about this issue. Again, the ballot language isn't going to show it. We have to have this conversation with people. And so I appreciate all of our elected officials here in Douglas County, especially the commissioners, for putting this together.
Thank you, Michael. Ben Murray, would you like to do a little minute wrap-up?
Yeah, of course. And Commissioner Thomas, I really appreciate you inviting me onto this call. And I appreciate everybody in the audience wanting to educate themselves, because this is one of those issues where we have to be educated. Our politicians are just not wanting to tell us what this really does. I don't want to repeat everything Michael said. He's spot on. Take everything he just said to heart. I want to add one thing. The TABOR, Gallagher, and Proposition HH, how they all work together, what's going on, that seemed to be the thing that was of most interest to folks in that survey question. My property tax series that's on YouTube. These are short 5-minute videos, about 5 minutes each. It's a series of videos. I explain, and I have graphics on the screen showing you visually what each of these things does, how that works, how TABOR interplays with Proposition HH, and what effect Gallagher had, and how repealing it mattered to people. I walk you through that in these short 5-minute videos. If you go to YouTube and you simply search IITV, so Independence Institute TV, IITV, and then click on the playlist tab, and you'll see the property tax series. If you're really serious about getting into that and understanding those issues, that is the #1 place to go, is that YouTube series at IITV.
Ben, thank you for changing your schedule to be here tonight. Your presentation this afternoon at the lunch meeting I went to was phenomenal, so thank you. Assessor Domish.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to thank the Douglas County Board of Commissioners, Board of County Commissioners. They've all been leaders in this area for a long time, even before this particular crisis hit us with credit levies that they've been implementing for many years. So thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Michael, for your expertise in this area in informing Douglas County citizens. I want to mention a couple of things that relate to what my office does. One, if you're on the phone, you're online, and you're 65 years of age or older, and you've been in your home for 10 years, and you do not have a senior exemption with my office, or you do not know whether you have a senior exemption with my office, please reach out and find out. It is a reduction of $100,000 of value off your property, and that is several $100s in property tax savings. So please check that. Number two, just to reiterate, we are working fiercely on our property tax appeals, and we will have decisions for those mailed on August 15th. So most homeowners in Douglas County will receive those on the 18th or 19th of August. And then finally, I want everyone to understand that we are doing everything we can on this topic. We're having these town halls. We're having the assessor protest period. We are doing everything we can in my office to determine whether we can make adjustments to value, and we're working hard on that. We are not going to stop in Douglas County with this issue. We're going to have the meeting with the authorities this fall in August, and we're going to continue to talk about it until we cannot talk about it anymore. And so that will be the rest of the year. You have my commitment. The commissioners have already committed to doing that. This isn't over today. We're just going to keep fighting for you. Thank you very much for attending.
And thank you all for being here and being engaged and wanting to know really what is going on. Here's the final message. We don't have the final answers tonight. This is going to be a very fluid conversation until after the election in early November. We are actually hoping that the Supreme Court takes HH off the ballot and forces the state legislature to go back in session and solve this problem without taking away our TABOR refunds. If that does not happen and HH passes, then there's going to be conversations about districts lowering their mills or figuring out how to help residents. If HH fails, then the governor's got a few weeks to go into a special session again. So I explain all that to tell you we don't know the answer today. You need to stay involved and pass the election so that we will continue to give you the absolute truth about what we know is going on. Finally, these kinds of shows don't happen without the support of Caroline, who has written our run of show probably 12 times. Roger moderates everything. Michael is somewhere in the back who manages the IT. There's Michael. Is Drew around the corner too? We have a whole staff of people hiding back there who are making this happen for the people in the room and the people on the line. We do that because we care greatly about the residents of Douglas County. Thank you, and God bless to all of you.
Commissioner, thank you very much for those nice words. On behalf of Douglas County, thank you for joining us this evening. If we did not get to your question tonight, we invite you to submit any questions you may have on this or other topics to douglas.co.us/citizen connect. We hope you'll join us again for a future town hall, and good night.